here and online. Welcome to the next lecture in our Colloquium series. We are having, before introducing today's speaker, let me remind everyone in person and online that we have a very rich series of lectures during the next weeks. We have, in 2 weeks, the next Colloquium series with our colleague, Professor Christoudias, on the effect of a supernova on atmospheric climate. Then we have on the 1st of June a colloquium and a video of archaeological and broader interest, being an islander. On the 8th of June, our colleague and new ERC grantee, Tuija Jokinen, is giving a lecture on clouds and climate. Then on the 22nd of June, we will have the Fermi lecture. You will be provided with more information later. Today, however, we are delighted to host Professor Andreas Anagiotos, a professor at the Cyprus University of Technology, a professor of biomechanics at the Mechanical and Materials Science and Engineering Department of the university, and the secretary of the Eratosthenes Center of Excellence, the Teaming Center of Excellence in Limassol. He was, as you know, the rector of the Cyprus University of Technology, vice rector of the university before that, member of the governing board of the Open University, and during his rectorship, he has worked a lot on the internationalization of the university, on creating the Innovation and Technology Transfer Office, and also he worked a lot on the attempt of the public universities to commercialize, to institutionalize the commercialization of their research output through startup work and so on. And now he is also, apart from secretary, also the person responsible for innovation at Eratosthenes. And he's also a member of the National Council for Research and Innovation, and this will probably be the main topic of his talk today. Andrea, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for your kind words, Theodore, and thank you so much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure and a great honor for me to be here today at the Cyprus Institute among friends, many friends, Thanasis, Kostas, President Malas, and Vasilis, and I am glad that I'm giving this presentation. When Theodoros had invited me for this presentation, I was debating whether to give you a technical presentation, and we have done a lot of work with implant contamination, with stent contamination, metal contamination on throughout the years with some implant retrievals that we had performed in the US, but also work that we have done here. But, and we were referenced actually by the Federal Drug Administration. But I thought that I should focus on a very important topic that is like a strategic topic for all of us, the Cyprus Institute, the Cyprus University of Technology, and the 2 centers of excellence that we have, one, the Eratosthenes Center of Excellence and the EME Care, and look at what has been happening in Cyprus in the past few years. And of course, we have Vasilis with us today that is very knowledgeable about the subject. And I thought that at the end of this presentation, we're going to have a good discussion about the future, because it's, I believe it's very important for Cyprus. So the way I have structured this presentation is to give you a historical perspective of scientific research and research funding in Cyprus, the earlier Research Promotion Foundation funding programs, the success of Cyprus in the EUFP and Horizon programs, the establishment of Research Innovation Foundation, and later on, of course, in the past 6 years, the Centers of Excellence and their role in the research landscape of Cyprus. Then, of course, we had the historical event of the Cyprus Deputy Ministry of Research, Innovation and Digital Policy. We'll look something very important, which is the Cyprus innovation performance in the EU, and then the conclusions and the challenges that Cyprus and all of us have to face. So, as we know, when the Republic of Cyprus was established in 1960, given the political situation, research was the last thing in the mind of the administrators that had to essentially run the Republic of Cyprus. And we had, and we still have the Office of Planning in the Ministry of Finance, which was planning and still plans the governmental budget, including developmental projects and subsidies, which we can call as research programs. And that was happening in the new Republic. And of course, those subsidies at the beginning of the Republic of Cyprus were being absorbed usually by the ministries and some government departments. So essentially, in the early years, there was no scientific research in Cyprus. There was no funding for scientific research, and of course, no university. So in comparison with other European countries, you know very well that we did not have a culture, a university culture or a research culture in Cyprus. And this is something that we still have to deal with it today. So it wasn't until about 30 years later that the University of Cyprus was established in 1990, and the whole situation with how the university was established. And it wasn't until about 33 years later, when Cyprus needed to be modernized in view of its aspirations to join the European Union, that the first official agency was established, the Research Promotion Foundation, which again was under the Office of Planning in the Ministry of Finance. And at the time, and of course Vasilis is here, that knows much more about this than myself, but the priority at the time was to develop the infrastructure, the research infrastructure in Cyprus, and to develop some local and international research networks, mainly with the Cypriots and Greeks of the diaspora. And in fact, in 1997, we had the first program for research project funding in Cyprus. And of course, at that time, they considered that was a lot of money, of about £240,000, which is equivalent to about 360,000 euros at the time. Now, of course, as we know, in 1998, Cyprus participates as a full member in the EU's fifth framework program. And then, of course, there were some players from Cyprus that participated in these two programs, the fifth framework from 1990 to 2002, and the sixth program from 2002 to 2006. Of course, we had the new player, a major player, the University of Cyprus. Then we had also the Cyprus Institute of Neurology and Genetics, of course, all these government ministries and departments of the government, and the private sector, including the private universities that at the time they had not achieved the status of university within the Republic of Cyprus, as you know. Of course, the Research Promotion Foundation continued with some more funding programs. In 2000, the year 2000, they had the programs for young researchers, and also some programs of cooperation with Greece. And in 2002, there was the first multi-annual framework program with multiple goals and uniform participation rules, which were called the DESMI programs for research technological development, which was about 18 million euro. Then, of course, a very important event happened in May 1st of 2004, when Cyprus joined the European Union together with 9 other European countries. So then the Research Promotion Foundation continued its funding programs and policies. And in 2005, we had the first innovation strategy, which was entitled the Regional Innovation Strategy for Cyprus. And of course, that was a big program in 2008. Some of us who remember this program, this specific program, that was the DESMI, Research and Technological Development, and that's when the first time the word innovation appears. That was between 2008 and 2010 with about 120 million, and it's the first time that Cyprus uses EU structural funds. Now, in 2011, we have a big institutional change with the appointment of a Director General, and Dr. Vasilis Tsakalos was the first director of the Research Promotion Foundation. And then there was a series of more targeted actions with RPF coordinating and defining the SMART specialization strategy for Cyprus. Then we had the National Research Innovation Framework Program, the Restart, from 2016, that with about 98 million that we also used EU structural funds. We also have the introduction of the electronic platform and the digital transition of the foundation, the reduction of the bureaucratic procedures. And here we have to commend Dr. Tsakalos for being instrumental in implementing these strategies. Throughout the years, since 2008, we had several committees that were appointed by the government. I will mention the Cyprus Scientific Council, which was led by the late Fotis Kafatos. He was the chair. Dr. Papanikolas was the vice chair, and there were 12 members from the Cypriot research community, both from Cyprus and abroad. And the role was to provide advice on scientific and research policies to the Republic of Cyprus. Mainly the aims were to assess the results of previous RPF programs, mapping of the research infrastructure of Cyprus, help with the smart specialization strategy, and promote, essentially this was the policy of the late Dr. Kafatos, the excellence in research, since he was, as you know, the president of ERC. And of course, we tried to promote collaborations with EU partners in EU funding programs for and in Cyprus. Now, in the 7th framework program, in addition to the University of Cyprus, the Cyprus Institute of Neurology and Genetics, the government agencies, and the different departments in the private sector, now we have some new players. And it all happens that all these players appeared about the same time, in 2007. So we have the Cyprus Institute, that was started its operation in 2007. We have the 4 private universities that were finally recognized as universities by the Republic of Cyprus. And of course, we have the introduction of the second conventional university in Cyprus, the Cyprus University of Technology in Limassol. But previously we also had the establishment of the Open University of Cyprus as a distance learning university. So Open University should have been here too. I apologize for not including it. So in this 7th framework program, Cyprus did extremely well. We actually claimed about 97.3 million. And I think the important thing is that it's not only that Cyprus got a lot of money, but Cyprus was among the first countries where the estimated income received from the FP7 funding for every euro spent was more than 1.5. In other words, for every euro that Cyprus was putting in this program, we got more than 1.5 euros back, which is, I think, that's an important thing that happened at the time, and it's still happening now in the Horizon 2020 program. And of course, in this program, which was between 2014 to 2020, Cyprus really took off with 736 approximately, because these numbers keep on changing on the European web page. There are still some programs from the Horizon 2020 that have not finished yet, so I think that's the case. But the Cyprus was able to claim about succeeding 736 projects with a budget of approximately 320 million, a small percentage of the budget compared to the Horizon 2020, but not too little for Cyprus. We only, again, contributed less. We contributed 219 million, and we collected more than 1.5 back. And then Cyprus, again, is something very important. It's the first place among EU member states in relation to the per capita net economic benefit from the program. Some more information about the Horizon 2020 program. The universities and research organizations got approximately about 60%, and the SME funding was about 37%, and about 163 projects were coordinated by Cypriot entities. Now, some more information about the success of Cyprus in the Horizon 2020 program. We see that always the big giant here is the University of Cyprus with approximately 25% of the whole budget of Cyprus. But then we have that the Cyprus Institute did extremely well with 27.7 million, including the 15 million from the EMECARE, the Center of Excellence. The Cyprus University of Technology was a close third But if you add, of course, the money of the Eratosthenes Center of Excellence, we are, in the second place together with the Cyprus Institute. Now, of course, as you know, in October of 2018, another important event took place, and of course, that was an effort, I believe, from the Cyprus government to improve the record of Cyprus as a research and innovation EU member state. I think that we're getting a lot of money, but when it came into being an innovator, into the exploitation of our research, in the early years, about 5 or 6 years ago, we're not doing that well. And perhaps that was one, perhaps Vasilis knows more about this, but this was one of the reasons that the RPF was restructured, but I think it was a very important change because finally it's not a foundation that promotes research, it's a foundation that is the national authority in charge of supporting and promoting research, technological development and innovation in Cyprus. Then something very important that has completely changed the research landscape in Cyprus occurred between 2015 and 2018. With the Spreading Excellence and Widening Participation Work program call in the teaming second phase, then Cyprus was able to claim 6 centers of excellence. This is a very historical success for Cyprus. It is also a huge challenge, as you know. But the European Union essentially had taken the big decision to fund these centers of excellence in Cyprus, and there were many other countries that were trying to get these centers of excellence. When you're talking about Poland or Romania or other much bigger countries, then of course the European Union took a big chance to fund these 6 centers of excellence. And of course, as we know, these centers of excellence get 15 million from the European Commission, 15 million from the Ministry of Finance, and about 5 to 10 million from other stakeholders, and they have full support essentially in the first 7 years, and they have some partial support in the following 8 years. It is a huge responsibility for Cyprus and completely changes, as I have mentioned, the landscape in Cyprus. So to give you some more details, as you know, in the first phase in 2015 or 16, I'm not quite sure, HEOS was the first that was funded. In the second phase, we had the funding of science. And then in the third phase, sometimes in 2018, we got the 5 additional centers of excellence, the Cyprus Maritime Institute, the EMECARE, the Climate and Atmosphere Research Center here at the Cyprus Institute, the Biobank at the University of Cyprus, and the Eratosthenes Center of Excellence, Earth Surveillance and Space-Based Monitoring of the Environment at the Cyprus University of Technology. So this drastically changes the recent landscape in Cyprus because it generates possibilities for research, innovation, and entrepreneurship on a large scale. We have more competitive research infrastructure and know-how for Cyprus. But of course, for other entities in Cyprus, it becomes a much more competitive landscape. In other words, the universities now or other research organizations, institutes, have to compete also with the centers of excellence for money, both in Cyprus and the European Union. And furthermore, we have one more, as you know, the 7th Center of Excellence, the Phaethon Center of Excellence in Renewable Energy Sources at the University of Cyprus, that has been funded very recently. So the other historical event that had occurred, I think is a very good move by the Republic of Cyprus. That was the establishment of a Deputy Ministry of Research, Innovation and Digital Policy with the role to transform the Cypriot society and economy through digital technology and to create a dynamic competitive economy driven by research, scientific excellence, innovation, technological development and entrepreneurship. And I think that this is the first time that research, innovation and entrepreneurship finds a home in yeah, sorry, finds a home in the government because, you know, in the past, the Research Promotion Foundation belonged to the Department of Finance. So we have a ministry now that is dedicated for research and innovation. And I think that the fact that it's called a deputy ministry, it doesn't mean that it's an inferior ministry than the other ministries. I think it's because of the constitution of Cyprus and the fact that Cyprus can only have 11 ministries, and it's not possible to have it. Could be a political problem. That's why all the new ministries that are created now are called, you know, deputy ministries. Of course, there was the formation of the National Board of Research and Innovation on an advisory role, but the ministry, once it was established, they developed a national strategy of research innovation with 4 pillars: research capabilities and excellence in research, to promote the research capabilities and ensure the development and adequacy of the research innovation ecosystem in Cyprus, because we still have to develop our ecosystem here. The innovation and entrepreneurship, in other words, to formulate a complete and integrated framework for the promotion of innovation and startup entrepreneurship, and the extroversion and international cooperation, which is to formulate a complete and integrated framework for the support of extroversion and the attraction of foreign investment. Of course, these are the plans with the sectional priorities to focus in areas of high added value for the economy and society. I think the ministry at that time decided to find an external organization to perform a study with all the stakeholders and essentially redefine the specialization strategy for Cyprus with the aim of diversifying Cyprus' economy into new activities and technological areas of higher knowledge complexity related to existing technological and business capabilities. So they were aiming into providing opportunities of higher returns and growth for Cyprus. Now, of course, a big issue that we'll have to be aware of, and this is the first thing I'm sure that Technoblois or any other company would have looked at, is the contribution of Cyprus, of the Republic of Cyprus, in the R&D activities of the European Union. And as you can see right here, these are the results from 2018 to 2019. Cyprus, unfortunately, has a dismal record with a very, very low percentage of its gross domestic product invested in research and development. Now, of course, the average for the European Union, and you can get all that information on the websites on Eurostat, actually. That's where I got it from. The average is about 2.19. We are currently about, well, no, actually, in 2019, we're at 0.63. Right now, we're at 0.89 of the GDP, but we were doing very, very dismally in the early years. So if you can look at this, I mean, you look at the performance of Cyprus since the year of 2000. This is from Eurostat. We see while the average of the European Union was always above 1.5, close to 2, and now it's about 2.3. We started even less than 0.25 at the year 2000. We gradually went up and came, we joined the European Union in 2004. We had a continuous, we didn't have any increase for several years. And then unfortunately disaster struck when we had the collapse of the banking system. And again, we went a little below our expectations. And while we are starting to go up in the years 16 through 19, then another disaster hit us with COVID that I think that is, prevented Cyprus from going above 1%. I hope that in the future we can. If we compare ourselves with the other European countries that had joined the European Union in 2004, that is Slovenia, Estonia, and other countries, we see that Slovenia, Estonia, and Hungary did very well from the beginning, and they were investing much more, and they were expecting to help their economy with the investment they did in R&D. And we're only, unfortunately, better than the poor brothers here, better than Bulgaria, Latvia, Malta, and Romania. So I hope that in the future we can do better in investing more of our GDP in R&D. Of course, this was the first thing that the Technopolis Group had reported to us, low investment in R&D. There was the need for the formation of an R&D support system with a greater capability to absorb new knowledge and generate international competitiveness for the Cypriot R&D system, and of course, the need for the improvement of the smart strategy in Cyprus. These were the suggestions that they had given: increase of the national budget in R&D investment, and this increase has to come not only from the government but also from the private sector. That's the big thing, really. Greater focus on strengthening research industry collaboration, internalization of the R&D system, complementarity in funding with Horizon Europe, and of course, national priorities and more targeting basic research, and also the better management of the national funding program with a consensus reporting, better time spread of invitations, and improving the monitoring system with the appropriate structure and data collection from the participants. Now, the ministry tried to introduce some reforms, at least that's what it's being claimed, to integrate the national strategy of research and development supported by policy tools and an interconnection between stakeholders from policymaking to strategy implementation, provide incentives for the encouragement and attraction of investments, easier access to research infrastructures and laboratory facilities funded by public funds. We always have the problem that some state-of-the-art laboratories that are established in public universities don't have as much use. And of course, there were investments in the Central Knowledge Transfer Office, investments in competitiveness of SMEs, startup and spin-off companies, transition to green development. This is something that Cyprus is doing very, very bad in technologies on green development. And I think these are great opportunities for the EMECARE Center of Excellence and the Eratosthenes Center of Excellence to perhaps mutually develop these kind of technologies, because Cyprus desperately needs them. And of course, the development of laboratories, communication networks for multi-use technologies. These are the reformed innovation strategy that the ministry had created with the Office of Knowledge Transfer and the Innovation Factory. There is an effort to further modify the legal framework for technology transfer and the establishment of spin-off by the public universities. They have given some tax incentives for investments in innovative business, increased the tax deduction for R&D expenditure, the register of innovative startup enterprises, the startup visa scheme, and for the first time we also now have the Cyprus Equity Fund, and further more support for private innovation and entrepreneurship. So the new Research Innovation Foundation funding program for 2021 to 27, you know most of the details, but I highlight that there is money that has been invested in collaboration and knowledge transfer, about 33.6 million, about 34 million in innovation, and I want to outline the fact that we now have this knowledge transfer office that aims in promoting commercialization of research. It provides several services. In fact, just a few days ago, they launched this program, which I think it may be good for all of us. We have spoken with this lady, Ms. Lee Spesser, who is a technology transfer commercialization senior consultant that is very, very knowledgeable and is helping us at the Eratosthenes Center of Excellence, and I'm sure that you'll probably utilize her services. But we also have the Innovation Factory with the development of an innovation culture, because that's another issue that we have. We don't have an innovation culture here in Cyprus. So if I could just highlight the aims of the policies and actions, of course, is to develop and expand the Cyprus research innovation ecosystem that is currently lacking, to improve the performance of Cyprus on the European Innovation Scoreboard, and of course, for the first time, I think, to establish research, innovation, and entrepreneurship as an important component in the Cyprus economy. So I think this is a big issue here that I think that the Republic of Cyprus in general today believes that research, innovation, and entrepreneurship is an important component in the Cyprus economy, and I hope this thing continues to be the case. So if we go then to the assessment of Cyprus in innovation as an EU member, as you know, there is this organization, the European Innovation, this entity, the European Innovation Scoreboard. This is the website that provides a comparative analysis of innovation performance in all EU countries and other countries in the world where they have different KPIs that evaluate each country. And what I have to tell you is that Cyprus started to do better in innovation in the past few years. For example, in this report in 2021, where the European Innovation Scoreboard essentially classifies the countries that are below the EU average as emerging innovators or moderate innovators, and the ones that are above the EU average as strong innovators and innovation leaders, then Cyprus at that time was essentially identified as a moderate innovator, where linkages, innovators, and employment impacts, these are some of the KPIs I'll show you in the next slide. We're doing very well. Top 3 indicators, such as international scientific publications, innovative SMEs collaborating with others, and population with tertiary education were our strong points. We had strong performance improvement from 2019 to 2021 due to the strong increases in indicators such as venture capital, broadband penetration, and product innovators and innovative SMEs collaborating with others. But we're still doing very bad in climate change related indicators. Then when we were evaluated with other countries, Cyprus in 2021 was established as a country that has increased performance together with Estonia, Lithuania, Italy, and Greece. And in fact, in 2022, I want to show you 21 and 22 to see the difference. Then from a moderate innovator, we were identified as a strong innovator. We were the one country with the greatest improvement among all EU member states. This was a big surprise to me, but we had a 38% performance improvement from 2015 to 2022, which is well above the average of the European Union, which is only about 10%. So, so the European Innovation Scoreboard, as I've mentioned before, bases its assessment on 4 modules: framework conditions, investments, innovation activities, and impacts, 12 divisions, some of them are shown here, and 32 KPIs. This was presented several months ago by the then chief scientist Nicholas Mastroianopoulos from 2020 to 2023. But essentially, if we look in more detail, for the first module, we see that in the module of human resources, so essentially what you see here, the first column is the indicator value. The second column shows the performance of Cyprus relative to the EU, with the EU average being 100. So if you're above 100, that means you're above the average. If you're below 100, you're below the average. This is the percentage change in the past 8 years. This is the percentage change in the past 2 years, and this is the ranking among the 27 member states. So we see that on the human resources, we're above average. That means we have inherited from our parents that we have a huge population with tertiary education. It's not something that has happened in the past few years. We traditionally are university graduates in Cyprus, so we're doing very well in Europe right now. The thing that is alarming, though, is that we have We're not doing very well on new doctorate graduates in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, ages 25 to 34. I can tell you that about 30, 40 years ago, there were many more people in Cyprus that wanted to get into these areas, but now it seems that we're well below the EU average. I think this is of concern. And of course, we're about on the average, a little below the average on the percentage populations participating in lifelong learning. If we look at the attractive research systems, we're doing okay because we have a lot of international scientific co-publications per million population. This is another KPI that the European Innovation Scoreboard uses. And I think now, with many universities, many institutes, such as the Cyprus Institute, and many centers of excellence, we have many more publications. That's why we're doing very well right here. But of course, we don't have as many with very on the 10% of most cited publications, but we're not doing very bad. Where we're also missing is on the digitalization with broadband penetration and individuals who have above basic overall digital skills. We are below the EU average. On the second module, you can see that of great concern is the fact that there is a very low score on the R&D expenditure in the public sector, but also on the direct government funding and tax support for business. Our performance here is very dismal. Now, we are also not very good also in the firm investments. It's not only that the public sector is not investing, it's that the private sector is not investing as much either. And we have an R&D expenditure in the business sector that is very low. Non-R&D innovation expenditures were doing better and very low on the expenditures, innovation expenditures per person employed. And we're doing okay on the enterprises providing training development on ICT skills. Now, on the next module, which is innovation activities, it seems that we're doing okay as innovators. We're doing okay with innovative SMEs collaborating with others. Where we're not doing very well, we should be doing better, is on the patent applications. We are very well below the average on PCT patent applications in Europe, and the design applications per billion were also about in the average. Of course, we're doing very well when we're trying to protect our trademark applications, so a lot of people are protecting their logos. Then on the final module, the impact, I would say that we're doing okay on employment impacts, very good on sales impacts, but very clearly, as I have mentioned, we're not doing very well on the environmental sustainability, the resource productivity, air emissions by fine particulate matter, and the development of environment-related technologies. We should be doing better. So, the last thing before the conclusions, the last slide before the conclusions, is the comparison of the performance of Cyprus in the Horizon 2020 program versus the Horizon Europe program. This program has finished, so in the 320 million that we got, about 40% was obtained by the private sector and about 36.6% by SMEs. It seems that now, in the Horizon Europe program, the trends, I would say that they are encouraging. We got about 45 million so far with 119 projects, and the private sector participated on the higher percentage, about 60.8%, with about 44.9% claimed by SMEs. So at this point, if we could try to summarize what we have seen in this kind of crash course in what has happened in Cyprus in the past 60 years, as conservative as I am, I have to say that Cyprus, from a country that had no universities and no scientific research until 1990, it has developed in the last 33 years into a more competitive country in research and innovation as an EU member state today. We also can say that Cyprus has been quite successful in securing research funds from EU sources. And of course, Cyprus did very well in the private as well as in the public sector with both contributions from the R&D institutions and the academic institutions, as well as the SMEs. The investment, the country's investment in the EU framework programs, FP7, Horizon, pays off very well, because for every euro that we put in, we get more than 1.5. So that's a good thing. Now, I think that for the first time in the history of the country, the Republic of Cyprus right now believes that research and innovation can be a productive pillar of its of development in the economy of the country. It's important to know that the government believes that research and innovation is going to help the economy, and that's very important to continue. Cyprus, I think, is on the right track to develop a viable research and innovation ecosystem. There's a lot of effort that needs to be done. I hope that it's going to be done by the system. And of course, Cyprus is strengthening its infrastructure and know-how, and its innovation status is continuously improving, not based on the assessment of the government, but on the assessment of the European Innovation Scoreboard KPIs. I would say at this point that there are good prospects for research, innovation, and entrepreneurship in Cyprus, and that innovation and entrepreneurship is going to help the economy of Cyprus. However, there are some huge challenges on the Cyprus innovation ecosystem. Of course, Cyprus needs to invest more public and private funds into R&D and increase its percentage of GDP in the EU framework programs. And the increase has to be, I believe, both by the government but also by the private sector. That's where we need to improve. Of course, we need to implement better criteria to evaluate the results of our local funding programs and optimize the use of the funds invested. Now, another thing that is also important, and it's not usually being mentioned, but I think I will mention it. A lot of course, the universities are educational organizations. They get all the public universities, they get all their money from the Ministry of Education. Now we have also the research institutes that also provide educational programs, and I think there should be a better coordination and collaboration on legislation, policies and funding between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Research, Innovation and Digital Policy. Now, another very important thing that we notice is that I mentioned that the private sector has very good success in these framework programs and the Horizon programs, but it seems that some of the funds, to say the least, some of the funds that are being received by the private sector are not entirely reinvested into the Cyprus research innovation ecosystem. In other words, companies that get private companies that get a lot of money, we would expect that they would invest it in the infrastructure, improve their infrastructure, and hire our new graduates or attract, graduates from abroad. But it seems that some money from the private sector that are being collected from the Horizon programs are not reinvested in the, in the Cyprus ecosystem, and that needs to change. And of course, the legal framework, it's always in front of us. This legal framework of Cyprus needs to be improved to allow a closer collaboration between the private sector and the public sector to boost productivity. There are more challenges. I think the Cyprus Institute has done very well in attracting qualified research personnel from abroad. This is a challenge for many universities, for many research centers, for many centers of excellence. But I think that the Cyprus Institute found the networking channels to achieve that, and we have to improve on that in the universities and the other research centers. Of course, the universities have to find ways to improve their innovation and entrepreneurship activities and invest in the development of IP spin-offs and marketable technology. This holds for the public as well as the private universities, but I think that the public universities would have to get some money from outside and supplement some of their income and replace some of their income from the government funding they receive. They're probably going to shoot me when they see that I say that, but this is the case. We have to focus on that too. Now, another huge challenge, and I put that in red, we have 7 centers of excellence that are absorbing a huge investment from the European Commission and the Ministry of Finance. The Ministry of Finance believed, because they put 105 million, because they believe that the economy is going to be helped. So we have a huge responsibility. Of course, we had a huge success, but a huge responsibility. And we must succeed in having these 7 centers of excellence to be financially independent in the next 5 or 6 years to strengthen the Cyprus research innovation ecosystem, to ensure that this investment that we have received, both from the European Commission and the Ministry of Finance is justified. Because even if one of these centers of excellence does not succeed, then it's not only that the European Union may not be so willing to provide more such infrastructure funds for Cyprus, it's also a psychological thing that researchers that are working in those centers of excellence would start wondering, whether they should be getting another job. So it's very important for the Cyprus research innovation ecosystem to have success with those 7 centers of excellence. And this is my last comment, and I'll shut up. There is definitely the general lack of innovation and entrepreneurship culture. From a young age, when I was a professor in the United States, there were kids, first-year students that were coming to me telling me that when I finish my engineering degree, I plan on developing my own company in this area, and I'm going to get in touch with this person, I'm going to do this. So this type of a mentality, unfortunately, is, I would say it's under development right now here, but we don't have this kind of culture. And I hope that the educational programs that the ministry will introduce, and essentially what we will be teaching our children, would help in changing that culture. So I would like to thank you for your attention, and be happy to discuss this.
Andrea, for this overview and the focus on the challenges. Josephine, you can start.
Andrea, thank you very much for a very insightful journey down memory lane. I want to tell you 2 things that are missing on your presentation, but I think they're important. The first one is that which is a bit of historical fact. When the Research Promotion Foundation, it was Kostas Kadis, I believe, was one of the first employees there, after they launched the program of the 260,000 pounds, they had an interim program of which, and the first infrastructure project that was awarded was 1.1 million project, and that was at the Institute of Neurology. And the second part, we have to pay tribute to one man, which by really a sheer coincidence and a friendship with a government official actually exponentially increased the funding in Cyprus, and that is Nikos Simeonidis. Okay. I was in his office when he picked up the phone to Andreas Moleskis, and he said, "How much money do you need for the Desmi? You showed a massive," yes? And the money was coming in big supply, so they talked about 30 million. Oh, I give you 20 million, and that's how it started. Now, I say this because, of course, there were people that wanted to invest in research, but as someone that I followed the development of research for many years, we never had planning. Never had planning. And I want to highlight that in your presentation, you show the microscope. What you show is an MRI view of the Cypriot ecosystem. We have to pick the microscope, and I wanted to highlight 1 or 2 things which are very insightful for everybody to do this analysis. You have to ask the question, why Cyprus, with 30 years of research, was able to be the champion in the 2 programs in relation to what they invest. There's a good reason for that, despite the fact that we're underinvesting in research from the national funds, but we're obviously doing well in the international arena. So there is a reason, and that reason compared to two blocks of countries. Compared to the Eastern Bloc of countries, Cyprus had brought in from abroad excellence. The University of Cyprus, the BAC, this institute and others, particularly the three that I mentioned, brought in excellence in the country, ready-made stuff. So mature scientists that could compete. So they were given some resources, they went out, and excellence won. The Eastern European countries perceived funding in a different way. They wanted to get bilateral agreements, so they didn't do well. Now, the Western countries, on the other hand, had something else. They had a lot of excellence, clearly they do have. So you have to ask the question, why didn't they do well in relation to what? And the reason is they have very mature core funding long-term programs. And that is the key. So when we do this analysis, we have to ask the question, what is the balance between what we invest in terms of long-term planning and what is the balance in relation to what we get from what we call recurrent funding, and that is what you showed. And that's where there is no analysis exactly. And you mentioned something about the centers of excellence. Now, you put this, the support of the centers of excellence, in whichever way you look at it, for instance, in the GDP. Now, all the centers of excellence received, what, 150 million euros over?
They got essentially 105 million from the Ministry of Finance and 105
over a 6-year period.
Over a 7-year period.
Right. Now, that is 0.7% of the GDP over a 7-year period. If you divide it by 7, then you know what the... So the actual contribution in terms of GDP, it's actual peanuts. So, and if you ask the question, what do I need to invest to sustain this ecosystem in terms of my GDP investment, it's still peanuts. Yes, it's actually about 0.1 to 0.2% of the GDP. So when we do this exercise, we have to really blow up some of the figures to really do an analysis exactly what the strategy now is. We have implanted excellence. We've put a lot of things, a lot of trees to grow. They grow very fast, but we need to consolidate, and we have to think how to consolidate this. And of course, you mentioned something about synergy and so on. That's what I want to mention, which I think is quite important in this analysis. The other thing which I'd like to highlight is the fact that you mentioned about the private sector. Now, as you know, the private sector in Cyprus in research started off with companies managing projects and grew with some companies doing R&D, and they're doing quite well.
Yes.
They're a bit cut off from the excellence ecosystem.
Yes.
So we need to bring them together, and this is something we want to...
This is the big challenge, yes.
Exactly. So we have to really think how to marry the two, since we have mature research scientists now, and able companies to attract funding on the other. The synergy between the two is the key for the consolidation of the ecosystem. And I don't know if you agree on that.
Yeah. Yes, I agree on that. This is the details of the 0.89, 0.85 that we have right now. 38% comes from private companies, 23 from the public budget, 21 from the Horizon program, and 12% from public universities, and then the big companies are the other 2%. And if we actually compare, well, somewhat of a comparison with the average of the European Union, we need to get more contribution from the private companies, from the private sector, I think, to help the Cyprus ecosystem in the best possible way. So, I mean, we do have to have more investment, public investment in from the percentage of GDP, but the private investment is also very important. So I don't know if you want to expand on that.
I think that what I said, Andrea, is that we must really focus on what we have in terms of the investment to consolidate. You
0.85% is our contribution right now.
Okay, so, but we don't have a policy. We have a policy on competitiveness
Yes.
through RIF, okay, we know that. But we don't have a policy on core funding.
Yes.
Yes, and that is the key. Now, core funding in this country is received essentially by three institutions. By the Institute of Neurology, and it was a fortuitous event. It was the establishment of the university, of the biology department that actually endowed them the money. It wasn't their own. It's this institute and the agriculture research, which are getting money, obviously, from the Deputy Minister of Research and from the Minister of Agriculture through a different structure. So we have no policy on it. So and that is where we are lacking the vision. That's exactly where, because that allows us to consolidate. We can keep the excellence of the centers of excellence. We can bring in the companies to collaborate with them with a minimal investment, essentially.
Yes. But of course, I don't know these details of how much money is being given, by the government to these institutions that you just mentioned. But for sure, I think in
0.08%.
That's
not a lot of money.
Okay. But I think that, I don't know if you agree that this is a very critical period right now, the next 5-6 years, because if we don't succeed on developing our ecosystem to actually be self-sustainable, then it's going to be hard for Europe to take us as an innovative country. And this very good record that we have right now as a strong innovator is going to be eradicated, essentially, if we don't continue. I think that Vasilis should get his opinion.
Just a moment, because Josefina has...
Yes.
Hi, sorry. I wanted to ask if you see any trends in the numbers yet between widening funds from the EU and non-widening funds, because Cyprus has the great advantage that it is a widening country, so there are a lot of pots of money open to Cyprus that are not open to most of the European countries. And that's a great advantage, obviously, and the widening pots have not been there for 20 years, but do you yet see a trend of how well Cyprus is doing in also getting non-widening funds? Because, of course, the excellent centers, they are widening funds, and that's a lot of money. But what's the trend for non-widening, for regular Horizon funds? Is it getting better?
I think now that we're improving our research and innovation ecosystem, we're going to see more clearly in the next 5 or 6 years if we're going to be doing better in the non-widening funds of the European Union. I hope we can be successful.
Because that would be actually the international competitiveness.
Yes.
Because the widening calls are not an international.
But unless we strengthen our infrastructure, our ecosystem, with a good technological infrastructure and know-how, then we're not going to be able to achieve what we're trying to achieve, in the next 5 or 6 years. Vasilis, I think that maybe we should mention a few things.
First of all, thank you for this comprehensive presentation. Really, I have a lot of comment to ask.
Yes.
And everything. Thank you for your kind words, by the way. I will continue a little bit, and I will build on what Stavros told, is that, in fact, we miss a structured approach about the core funding and in general the funding of research. There was one of the strategic directions of the National Research and Innovation Plan was to prepare a framework like the British Excellence Framework, where there will be an evaluation of the performance and the output of the research centers, of the centers of excellence, of the universities. And based on this framework, not only the core funding would be affected, increased or decreased, but also supplementary funding based on very good performance would be decided. The funding of the Cyprus Institute, the Institute of Neurology, even the Centers of Excellence, is decided ad hoc.
Yes.
I mean, it's a matter of negotiation, good or bad contact of the upper management of these centers, the approach of the minister in this period, maybe it would be better, in the future, maybe it will be worse. But it's a lot of ad hoc situations.
It happens in a lot of parts of our system here in Cyprus. This
I agree with you, but and some other aspects are also ad hoc, and I think that the National Board of Research and Innovation, in which you participate, can play a very important role. The Deputy Ministry was created, but without sufficient staff. Most of the people are taken from the Research Innovation Foundation, and this is how they have the resources to do their business. There was a plan to increase the investment in research innovation programs, and then there was a decrease. Or most of the money now comes from the structural investment funds and the Recovery and Resilience Fund, and much less from the national budget. There is a lot of discussion about this sustainability of the centers of excellence, but nobody described what is the sustainability, how it looks like. And my question, because I have to ask some questions, is what is your approach regarding the sustainability or the financial independence of the centers of excellence? This is my first question.
Yes.
And my second question is if you can elaborate further on how these SMEs who are champions in attracting research funds can become more useful for the research and innovation ecosystem, because I believe that this linkage, better linkage with the university or the research centers is not enough. We need more structuring, more structural effects. I mean, 60% of the funding we attract from the framework programs go to these companies, but we cannot see these companies around where they are, what they produce, and how the National Board, and the Research and Innovation Foundation, and the research centers can help them, can support them, can do more.
I'll start with your second question.
Yes, closer to the microphone if possible,
Yeah.
for the online.
The online thing, yes. Yeah, I think that these SMEs that are getting a lot of money actually from the Horizon programs, as I have previously mentioned, they have to be committed to the research and innovation ecosystem of this country. I mean, is their intention to become stronger in research and innovation and become real competitors at the European level? In other words, they're making a lot of money right now, but is the strategy of these companies geared towards becoming even more competitive and essentially competing at the highest level? And then we're going to be able to see what the lady over there has mentioned as being able to compete with the more research developed countries and all those big companies that are doing very well. So to do that, they have to demonstrate that they're willing to, instead of making unrelated investments, to make an investment in their infrastructure and hire more people and become stronger. I don't know how it can be imposed on them by, the central government, but I think that unless that thing happens, then we're not going to see these companies developing into the components of our ecosystem that is going to make us stronger and more competitive in the next 5 or 6 years. So it's not an easy question, but I think it's a policy, it's the policy of these countries, and perhaps the government should figure out ways to give them incentives, to do that, more incentives to do that. Now, as far as the sustainability of the research of excellence, this is a very difficult question. What we've been discussing, in the past, and I'm showing you this established R&D organizations in Europe and the examples of income distribution. This is the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany, the TNO in Netherlands, and SINTEF in Norway. And they get a lot of money from the government. In fact, they're getting a lot of money from the government to ensure their sustainability, as you see right there. Okay, so for the Fraunhofer Institute, there's a 30% annual subsidy from central government. For the TNO, about 40% annual subsidy from the central government. That's a lot of money. I don't know how those governments, and we're not talking about small European countries. We're talking about Germany and the Netherlands. Except for Norway, that is only providing 10% of the support. It seems that if these organizations get so much money in subsidies, then what is the possibility of the research centers, the centers of excellence, to achieve sustainability?
These examples are mostly applied research and innovation.
Yes.
Not
centers of excellence. Yes. Yeah, of course, these are more established, so if this...
More established and more applied.
More applied, yes. Yes. So, it is a very difficult question. We do have a plan, for example, if I could tell you what we are trying to do, at the Eratosthenis Center of Excellence, we plan on, this is only what we plan in the Eratosthenis Center of Excellence, but of course there is a huge pressure to continue to be successful in research grants from the European Union. We have to develop some service contracts from the center's applications and technologies, and that's not easy, but I think that it's possible. And I think if the centers of excellence that have overlap, and the EMECare, I believe the EMECare and Eratosthenis can have a very good collaboration, an overlapping of expertise, complementary expertise. We can get some service contracts from applications and technologies in Cyprus and abroad. We have to focus on that because that's very important. Now, the development of intellectual property is not an easy thing. We all know that. It's not that you can say that you will develop a patent that is going to be sold and you're going to be making millions. It's not. But we still have to pursue this thing wherever possible. And we will provide educational and training services and, of course, perhaps some leasing services from major infrastructure. But these essentially are what our plan is for the sustainability. In the proposal that we had, we are saying that we want to get about 20% industry and exploitation of services, 30% easy projects in the Eratosthenis case, 20% from projects in the Eastern Mediterranean, Middle East, and North Africa region, 15% national projects, and 15% from our ESA. So we do have a plan, but it will depend on how successful we are in implementing our business plan. And it's not easy. But I'm going to be very honest with you and tell you that all the centers of excellence eventually at the end, and of course it's happening with GEOS right now, at the end of the 7 years, they will be asking more money from the government. So it's inevitable. It's inevitable. So we're not going to be dreaming, but and it's a big issue with Cyprus because we got a lot. We have a lot of success, but it is a huge challenge. So
let's have a final question from Thanasis, and then we can continue outside.
Thank you, Andrea, for the presentation and for the ensuing discussion. I would like to challenge one of your indicators, which I think is a sign of a very bad attitude.
Okay.
And this is the indicator that says we contribute 1 and we get 1.5. I think that the reason why we contribute 1 is not to get more than that. It is because being about, 2 per 1,000 of the European population, we expect that by giving one, we will receive 500 worth of research results, which we would like to put in our economy. So it could be that our own research and innovation could be have very little relevance to what actually is happening in Cyprus. But if we can actually use the research and innovation that's taking place in the whole of Europe, it is then that we will be an innovative and entrepreneurship economy.
So, I mean, if I understand what you're saying, and I cannot really challenge what you're saying, is that perhaps we put €1, but the 1.5 we are getting back is not as well targeted, towards what we want. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that the 1.5 is irrelevant,
Yeah.
and it can even be false, because it can have behind it companies
Yes.
that are just investing in European projects.
I think this is a problem. We don't want to precisely say that, but we have to address that problem, okay? We have to address that problem. Yeah.
There is a very last question.
No problem, no problem.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I'm an international guy that you mentioned, and was very, very informative, the presentation, to understand the evolution of a system that is young and sometimes is pushed to be compared with other systems. Your slide that you showed with Fraunhofer, TTO, and Sintef is great. I came to Cyprus, but before I was 6 years in Norway, so I know a little bit. And I know that often it's one saying that is very common is that Sintef gets 10, 20% from the state. Is not really true. So this is the direct core contribution, but for every European project that they get, also university was getting in NTNU, you have additional funds that comes from the research foundation, the Norgesforskningsrådet. So it's called the stimulating fund. So
The matching funds. We had them in Cyprus many years ago.
And basically, this is sort of indirect. You can, depending on what kind of message someone wants to conceive, then you can top up or not. But what is interesting is that these additional funds are still important for covering the core expenses. So overheads and whatever, because having labs that work, doing good research costs. And just relying, I'm Italian by the way, so just relying on the possibility of attracting continuously funds through competitive resources create a very unrobust system. So this is the case, for example, of Italian universities. There is always not the challenge of becoming a consolidated, robust ecosystem, but surviving. So this is a very critical issue. And from your graph, what we can see that basically the core contribution in those three institutes is about 40%. So to have a system that can really be sustainable, core contribution needs to be provided around 30 to 40%, Germany 30, but industry in Germany is much consolidated, very strong. It's just simple to see the number of patents that you have per year. And this gives you the idea of the kind of collaboration you have between research institute, universities, and the private sector, and also the way in which research and development is done, that is sometimes delegated to some institutes. So what is here the center of excellence in Germany, in some bigger systems, are sort of departments that are affiliated with large names. Also the UK is like that. So for Cyprus, I think that is quite special because industry here is not as consolidated, so Fraunhofer cannot be, by definition, a reference model. It's quite young, can change very quickly, in the good and in the bad, showed the system high resilience, because after what happened in 2013, the system actually didn't crash completely, and other countries, I think, could be much more subject to stress. But this really requires sort of systematic and longer-term planning in not only designing the innovation ecosystem. But what is for the country this opportunity that is a new sector, like tourism, like other things, because we cannot rely here in Cyprus on industry or other, or building construction anymore. So we cannot construct more and absorb society with that. Thank you.
It's always a huge challenge for every country, every system, and the administrators to provide the necessary, incentives for the ecosystem, the research innovation ecosystem, to be productive. We are developing our ecosystem right now. In fact, what I'm trying to find here is when Technopolis did an assessment for us, and this is just of course, the opinion of a company that talked to the stakeholders and tried to find the strong points and the weak points of the system and give advice to the government what incentives to give and how to develop the system. One more thing that I didn't have to show is that they did this kind of a comparison between the relation to existing competences and activities versus the knowledge complexity. And of course, this divides into 4 squares. You don't want to be here, but you want to be here. So traditionally, when we believed as Cyprus that the construction, tourism, and the shipping or the agri-food would have been our strong areas, these are areas of low risk, low benefit. So if you want, to risk and have a better return, then they identify that perhaps you can invest on quantum technologies, on high performance computing, on space, on medical equipment, nutraceuticals, which are products derived from food sources with extra health benefits, or cosmeceuticals, or superfoods. Essentially, somebody who has looked at our whole system and talked to all the stakeholders gave this kind of advice. But again, having to compete in a very competitive environment in Europe, in a system that is not completely, in an ecosystem that is not completely developed, you're going to have to take chances. And I think Cyprus is actually taking big chances right now for the next 5 years, because we invested so much money in these centers of excellence, and we are, we have already determined that these are the areas that we're going to try to succeed and to be better than other centers in Europe. So I think only time is going to show if we're doing the right thing, and it's not an easy thing. So,
Andrea, thank you very much.